All right, so we're about to go down one of history's weirdest rabbit holes. We're heading back to the 18th century to talk about two men who had an appetite so impossible that it completely baffled science and honestly pushed the very limits of what it means to be human.
I know, it's a shocking question, right? But it's where we have to start with this story. And we're not talking about some urban legend. We're talking about a documented event, something people saw with their own eyes. A man, completely in the grip of this insane hunger, who would literally tear open a live cat, drink its blood, and eat the whole thing, just leaving the bones behind.
And if you thought that was wild, it gets even crazier, because one of these men was recorded as eating 174 cats in a single year. This wasn't just being hungry, this was something else entirely. A biological glitch, a mystery that turned two regular guys into absolute legends of gluttony.
Now here's what makes this story so unbelievable. It's not just about one guy. It's about two different men living at the exact same time, fighting in the same war, and both were tormented by this impossible hunger. Their parallel lives create this medical and historical puzzle that, honestly, we still haven't solved.
So let's meet our main characters. On the left, you've got Tarrare, a Frenchman. On the right, Charles Domery, a Polish soldier. And just look at this chart. The parallels are uncanny. Same era, both ended up in the French army, and both had the same off-the-charts condition. And they became famous for what they ate. For Tarrare, it was anything from dead bodies to live animals. For Domery, it was things like cats and, yeah, even a human leg.
Let's start with Tarrare. His condition kicked in when he was a kid, and it was so bad that by the time he was a teenager, he could eat a chunk of a bullock equal to his entire body weight in 24 hours. I mean, imagine that. His parents just couldn't feed him. They had to kick him out to fend for himself. And Domery's family had a similar problem. He was one of 9 brothers, and apparently all of them had the same crazy appetite.
And here's the paradox. You'd think they'd be enormous, right? But no, both men were described as slim, almost skinny. Their bodies were just a collection of bizarre contradictions. They had these huge, wide mouths with stained teeth, and when their stomachs were empty, their skin was so loose they could literally wrap it around their waist. They also sweated constantly and gave off a smell so bad that one of the doctors who studied Tarrare said you couldn't stand to be within 20 paces of him.
So, what does a society do with something it can't explain? Well, in the 18th century, a time that was a weird mix of scientific curiosity and a love for a good spectacle, the answer was basically twofold. First, you put it on display. And then, you try to use it. Tarrare and Domery's journey took them from being street performers all the way to the front lines of a major European war.
Their paths to the army were different, but both were born out of pure desperation. Tarrare, he used his condition to make a living as a street performer. He'd swallow corks, stones, even live animals for a shocked audience. Domery, on the other hand, was so starved in the Prussian army that he actually defected to the French side just because he heard their rations were better. But for both of them, army life was a complete disaster. The standard rations weren't nearly enough, which sent them on a constant, frantic hunt for garbage, scraps, anything.
This quote from Dr. Percy, the chief surgeon who really studied Tarrare, it just paints such a chilling picture. It wasn't just that he ate animals. It was like there was something about his presence, this overwhelming aura of hunger that was so intense, even the animals could sense it and were terrified of him. Okay, this is pretty graphic, but perhaps nothing shows the raw desperation of their condition more than this moment. Charles Domery is in the middle of a naval battle. A cannonball flies across the deck and severs a fellow sailor's leg. His first instinct? It wasn't horror. It was hunger. He literally grabbed the severed limb and started eating it before his crewmates, completely horrified, managed to wrestle it away from him and throw it into the sea.
Yeah, no surprise, these guys didn't last long as soldiers. They quickly became objects of intense medical fascination. For the military doctors, they were the perfect storm, a medical puzzle to solve, and, maybe, a new kind of weapon to exploit. It was a situation that completely blurred the line between scientific research and just outright cruelty, raising ethical questions that were way, way ahead of their time. Take a look at this number, 15. What do you think that could possibly represent in a story like this? It's not cats, it's not rats, it's the number of people a single meal was cooked for, and then served to one man. In one of the most famous experiments, Dr. Percy gave Tarrare a meal meant for 15 laborers. We're talking 2 giant meat pies, plates of grease and salt, 4 gallons of milk, the whole shebang, and he ate every last bit of it. His stomach swelled up like a giant balloon, and he just fell asleep on the spot.
So then the military got this brilliant idea. Let's turn Tarrare into a spy. The plan was simple. He'd swallow a wooden box with a secret message inside, cross enemy lines, and pass it at his destination. The very first mission was a total farce. He didn't speak a word of German, so he got caught instantly. He was tortured. They even staged a fake execution. And when he finally passed the box, the Prussians opened it up and found a dummy note. The whole thing was just a test. It was a complete and utter failure. Meanwhile, Domery had been captured by the British, and of course, he became an experiment too. This chart shows what he ate in just one day as a prisoner of war. Now, they were already giving him 10 times the normal rations, but he was still eating the prison cat and any rats he could find. In this specific experiment, he put away 16 pounds of raw meat and tallow candles, washed it all down with 4 bottles of porter, and apparently he did all this without ever vomiting or even needing to use the toilet.
So, the big question is, what on earth was wrong with them? After all the failed experiments and the horrors of war, the doctors started to focus on trying to find a cure. But this is where their story just hits a brick wall, revealing the absolute limits of 18th century medicine. Doctors were faced with a condition so far outside anything they had ever seen, they were completely lost. Nothing worked.
Today, we actually have a medical term for their main symptom, polyphagia. It just means an extreme, insatiable appetite that never, ever goes away, even after eating. But, and this is the crucial part, it's not the disease itself. It's a massive red flag that something else is deeply wrong inside the body. So, what could have been the real cause? With modern science, we can at least make some educated guesses. Could it have been hyperthyroidism? That would explain the appetite and the constant sweating. Maybe a damaged amygdala, a part of the brain that helps control appetite? Or it could have been a rare genetic disorder, like Prader-Willi syndrome, or even a really severe undiagnosed case of diabetes. But honestly, without being able to study them today, we'll probably never know for sure.
Tarrare's story, it takes an even darker turn here. He ended up back in the hospital, desperate for a cure. And while he was there, a 14-month-old child vanished. Tarrare, who'd already been caught trying to eat bodies from the morgue and drink blood from other patients, was immediately the #1 suspect. We don't know for sure if he did it, but the accusation alone was enough. He was chased out of the hospital by an angry mob.
4 years later, Tarrare reappeared, this time dying from tuberculosis. And after he died, they did an autopsy. What they found was just shocking. His esophagus was so wide you could literally see straight down into his stomach. His liver and gallbladder were huge. And his stomach, it was gigantic, covered in ulcers, and it took up most of the space in his abdomen. It was a horrifying sight, but it provided no real answers as to why.
On his deathbed, Tarrare claimed his whole illness was caused by a golden fork he'd swallowed years earlier, and then it was stuck inside him. They looked for it during the autopsy. They never found it. And this missing fork, it's kind of become this powerful symbol for the whole mystery of his life.
And this quote from a modern pathology lecturer, Dr. Alan Bates, just nails it. The search for the fork is like the surgeon's search for a simple, physical cause for what was wrong with Tarrare. But he never finds it. It's a metaphor for the limits of science, for that intangible part of humanity that you just can't find with a scalpel.
In the end, Tarrare and Domery lived on the absolute fringes of society. Their lives were this constant, blurry line between science and showmanship, between their own free will and being exploited. They were treated as curiosities, as military tools, as medical subjects, but very rarely as just men. Their extreme condition forced everyone around them to confront the very limits of nature, of medicine, and of human empathy.
And that really leaves us with the final question, doesn't it? How should we remember these guys? As medical oddities, as victims who were exploited their whole lives, or simply as human beings trapped by a devastating illness that nobody back then could possibly understand? Their story isn't just a bizarre little piece of history. It's a profound and deeply unsettling look into the abyss of our own biology and the enduring mystery of the human condition.